Coming up on market shares, the S&P snapping a 3-week losing streak but still took a 200-point loss to close out February. We'll take a look at the February market report.
Plus, the House Select Committee on China held their first hearing this week. We're tracking its effect on 3 key stocks.
And the labor market showing its first signs of cooling. We'll break down the numbers. Hold on to your wallets because market shares starts right now.
Good morning and welcome into Market Shares. I'm Teagan Brown.
And I'm Bradley Hoppenstein. Thank you for starting your morning with us. Let's start things off with the market update as usual. Bit of a shaky week, shaky month if you look back towards February. Last week the market's having their worst week of 2023, but now there's some things looking up, Teagan. So let's take a look at the Dow ending the week with that nice graphic. Ending the week 33,390, but still down about 500 points over the last 30 days. But the Dow breaking its 4-week losing streak. Now you see that dip in the middle. That was when the Treasury yield broke its high, 4% over the 10-year outlook. Now it's kind of eased. You see the stocks moving back up on Friday. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ, Teagan.
Yeah, let's look at it. It jumped 2% this week, and that's the biggest jump out of the 3 indexes that we're taking a look at. It hit its low point on Thursday there, a very clear and distinct drop. It hit 11,273, but it did manage to climb a little bit higher than experts had thought it would finish this week, to finish at 11,690. And let's go to the last one, Bradley.
Let's go to the S&P. So the Purchasing Managers Indices, which is another key inflation, or excuse me, a key measure of the economy when it comes to inflation, showing investors what they want this week. So demand for services back up, some healthy growth, and lower prices with inflation. But the key with the S&P is going to be that February jobs report coming Friday. The S&P ending the week at 4,045, still down about 65 points over the past month, though.
Yeah, and let's take a look at our
market
movers.
Let's get to our market movers on the week. I think we're going to start things out with Google today. There we are. Google down about 9 points on the week. Few things going on with Google. It has 2 antitrust suits filed against Google from the DOJ. There's that Supreme Court case that we had Chiappone talk about last week. And a lot of tech companies are kind of reshuffling. We've heard about layoffs a lot. Google is no exception. Some layoffs with Google, and we'll talk about AI a little more later in the show, but Google making some moves in the AI space, but not quite enough to keep its stock up.
Yeah, next up, Chipotle Mexican Grill. Listen, on the week it performed, all right. It went up 1.34%, but the entire month, a whopping 11.19% drop. It was way lower than experts predicted, their final at the end of this fourth quarter here. They had an expected EPS of 8.90, but they only achieved 8.29. Their expected revenue, $2.23 billion, and they only made 2.18. I mean, we've talked about, fast food a couple of weeks ago, how they've been performing. Chipotle just has not measured up to the other fast food chains.
Yeah, I was talking to a few people yesterday, and I was like, when was the last time you ate at Chipotle? And we all came to the same conclusion. We have not been to one of the stores in a while.
They're always out of chips.
Always out of chips.
Every time.
Always running low. They're skimpy on their protein scoops, but the stock reflecting that. One last stock we want to look at today is Costco, down about 40 points on the week. Steady decline on the month overall. They reported their Q2 earnings on Thursday. That didn't help. Shares continued to drop. Earnings dropped more than 2%. They missed their revenue expectations, but they were still up about 6.5% from a year ago. But last week we talked about Walmart making moves to compete with Amazon. Costco's e-commerce sales also dropped. So on that earnings call, their CEO was asked, CFO rather, Richard Galante was asked, are you going to raise membership prices? It's been about 5 years, which is typically their timeline for raising membership fees. So he said it's not a question of if, it's a matter of when they will raise prices. Now, let's take a look overseas. The House Select Committee holding their first hearing on the CCP Wednesday night on Capitol Hill. That was the first of many expected hearings under the new GOP-led House over the next 2 years.
The focuses of the first hearing were human rights and surveillance. There were 4 witnesses, including H.R. McMaster and Matt Pottinger, who were both national security advisors to former President Donald Trump. In his testimony, Pottinger suggested the U.S. government should partner with American technology companies that are banned in China to break through the, quote, Great Chinese Firewall. Mike Gallagher, the Republican chairman of the committee, opened with a chilling statement about the relations between the 2 countries.
It's not a polite tennis match. This is an existential struggle over what life will look like in the 21st century. and the most fundamental freedoms are at stake.
All right, now let's take a look at the three major stocks associated with China. Obviously 2 of these in the green, pretty up. But last, we're seeing kind of a mix here right now, Bradley.
A bit of a mix, and it really comes down to the Chinese economy resurging after COVID. They had that zero COVID policy, but we're starting to see a resurgence. But really, it comes down to questions, I think, when it comes to trade and foreign policy with the U.S., China taking a side with Russia in the war on Ukraine now. A lot to think about when it comes to the Chinese economy, Teagan.
Right, I think the attitude around the Chinese economy here in the U.S. has really changed over the past couple of years, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, the U.S. sending manufacturing jobs that way. Now we're trying to bring them back. Looks like the Chinese economy is coming back post-pandemic, though.
Yeah, and let's talk about the drug maker Eli Lilly. They're planning to cut prices on its most commonly prescribed insulin products by 70%. The company also set a monthly cap of $35 on out-of-pocket customer costs.
The insulin industry's faced criticism over the past few months regarding high prices. Eli Lilly provides insulin to 3 in 10 diabetics in the U.S., so you think other companies will follow suit. That's likely going to be the case. CEO David Ricks said they're doing this because it's the right thing to do. Amid the Inflation Reduction Act that was approved last year, that act capped insulin prices at $35 for people with Medicare. Eli Lilly's trying to make that push to the private sector amid the Biden administration.
Yeah, I mean, Senator Chuck Schumer was a really big advocate for this cap of $35. And you can see, I mean, look at that. Eli Lilly going down tremendously and then coming up, and they're going to probably keep going up after this 35 cap. And of course, their competitor right there also going up. But it's the question of, are they going to cut their prices as well?
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think so. You'd like to think Eli Lilly is kind of leading the pack here and its competitors will soon follow suit. And Meta and Spotify both making moves in the AI space. The AI race, is heating up, and we're seeing a lot of that. We've been talking about AI on this show every week. Meta now, the latest tech company to make some moves. They're creating a new AI research and development group in the company with plans to bring some of that technology to some of its products relatively soon. CEO Mark Zuckerberg, says they're exploring what they can do with text and images. So right now, that AI push is largely focused on WhatsApp and Instagram, Teagan.
The announcement is a sign that Zuckerberg isn't going to let competitors pass him in AI, with competition from Google and Microsoft. More on AI and the craze around ChatGPT later on in the show. But let's put this stock coupling up for our viewers. Meta and Spotify both making moves in the AI space. Spotify obviously announcing last week, I think we talked about it for a couple minutes, creating those playlists for people and just that kind of individualized artificial intelligence making things for people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Spotify's kind of been playing around with this kind of thing for years. They used to make playlists based on like heart rate if you were working out. Now they're trying to use AI to kind of match songs to what you're listening to. And Meta, really interesting how AI could be used in social media, likely giving you suggestions, more probably on the ad sales side, but interesting push for Meta here, Teagan.
Yeah, and we'll talk about, some controversy with AI later in the show.
We will. Now, another tech giant, TikTok, is rolling out a new policy for users under 18 years old. It wants to limit teen screen time on the app by setting a 1-hour time limit by default. Users can change the setting, but those under 13 won't be able to turn it off without a parent or guardian's approval. So if you're under 18 and go over 60 minutes on the app, a prompt with a passcode will pop up so you can possibly stay on with your parents' approval. The idea here being TikTok trying to address scrutiny from lawmakers, parental groups, and mental health advocates over the app's role in mental health struggles among teens.
Hey, good thing I'm over 18. I spend way too much time on TikTok. But streaming giant Netflix is reducing subscription prices in some countries, but don't get too excited because we're still paying the same amount that we were right here in the US. But in countries like Croatia, Kenya, and Thailand, the cost to watch will go down. Netflix says this is part of their effort to expand its global footprint and expand outside of the US. The stock hit their low for the month on Thursday, and overall in the last 30 days, it's fallen 12.81%. No doubt that's partly due to a crackdown in password sharing. And now we welcome into the studio our stock analyst, Sean Dempsey. Sean, what do you have for us this morning?
Good morning, Teagan. The stock market is an interesting thing. One week it can be in the green, and the next it can be in the red for absolutely no reason. This week I'm going to be highlighting 2 stocks and an index that have gone under the radar a bit. Those are Enphase Energy, Apple, and the Volatility Index. Let's start things off with the Volatility Index. Everyone knows that the stock market can be volatile at times, especially nowadays when there's little certainty about the trajectory of the economy. The Volatility Index, or VIX for short, gives investors a view of how stable the economy is or how much consumer confidence there is in the market. The higher the number on the index, the more fear there is in the market. Since COVID, the VIX has come down by a substantial amount and is now sitting at around the 19-point mark. With rate hike still on the horizon, we could see the VIX jump back up in the next 1 to 2 months towards where it was just a year ago. And as you can see for the VIX, this was the big jump during COVID, jumping up to 60, almost 80 points, and has since come down from that mark. But you can see in 2022, there's still been some back and forth battling because of the rate hikes that happened over the course of last year. Next up is Enphase Energy. The company develops, manufactures, and markets home energy solutions. Enphase's stock price finished up 5.7 this past week after reporting better than expected earnings. Now, what I really want to point out doesn't necessarily have to do with Enphase, but the renewable energy sector as a whole right now. In 2022, the energy sector was one of, if not the best performing sectors in a struggling economy. Enphase in particular rose 45% in 2022, but what goes up must come down. Year to date, Enphase Energy is down 15%, while the major indexes are performing much better. So why is this? Well, typically when tech stocks are getting beaten down, investors turn to energy and consumer discretionaries as a safer investment. And as you can see here on Enphase's stock chart, they've been doing sort of good over the past few months. According to investorplace.com, Enphase Energy deserves an A rating for the company's solar market leadership. And as you can see here, since the start of 2023, the stock is struggling to keep up its momentum from 2022. The stock peaked at $336 per share in December of 2022, and now it sits at around the $217 mark. But analysts have raised their price targets for Enphase because of their better than expected earnings, so a rally may be possible for the stock in the coming months. And finally, I want to highlight the tech giant Apple. The company has been one of, if not the safest investment over the past decade. But has the stock lost some steam recently? Apple has bounced 19% off its recent lows, but Apple's revenue has declined to the mid-teens. On top of that, Apple's demand in China and Europe has also slowed down by a large margin when compared to its sales in the United States. Yet, I don't think investors should be scared because consumers continue to buy iPhones and add to their Apple ecosystem every year. So even though that Apple's best days may be behind it, they still have the strongest customer loyalty in the tech sector. Not to mention, Apple has the best user experience in their space as well. Now, what I want to highlight is what I was talking about before, is that the stock is in the same place as it was in July of 2021. That's where the red light turned on for me. This company still has fantastic fundamentals, always has and always will, but as a strong growth company, I think its best days are behind it. In fact, CNBC's Joe Terranova said that Apple has lost its momentum when compared to its competitors and has since sold the majority of his shares in his ETF that he manages. Teagan, Bradley.
And now, Sean, a lot happening with Apple and AI right now. I mean, we already talked about AI a little bit, but, you know, Blix Inc., an app that they're not allowing to update. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting with Apple is that they're kind of a little bit behind in the AI sector when compared to a lot of different companies. And that's something they're just going to have to work on going forward. I mean, competing with Meta and some of those other tech giants, Microsoft, like we're going to mention later in the show. And so Apple really needs to focus on that if they want their revenues to skyrocket once again.
Yeah, iPhone's still making up a vast majority of their sales, but their services, they've been heating those up in recent years, and AI, we know the other tech giants are rolling things out. We'll see if Apple competes. After the break, the Supreme Court heard arguments on Biden's student loan forgiveness plan, President Biden that is. Our political analyst, Dominic Chiappone, will be in studio with more.
Here's to the stragglers.
They did that with Trump earlier, too. They didn't put his first name in first.
Your charitable. The first ones. Yeah, I miss my beard ones. But hey, I look good with this ones. But no way he's grown that in the weak ones. The black, brown, red, and gray ones. That one. The itchy ones. The never forgotten ones. The ones grown by Dad. The ones grown for Dad. The started late ones. The absolutely filthy ones. The drawn on ones. The finger ones. The pin ones. The I nearly didn't do it this year ones. And the yeah, why not ones. They all raise awareness, raise funds, start conversations, and save lives. Because whatever you grow will save a bro. Learn more at Movember.com.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back to Market Shares. So the world of artificial intelligence is pretty much just getting started, and ChatGPT has been an interesting and for some scary part of it. So we figured we'd put it to the test and ask it to write about few things for us. Keep in mind, this AI doesn't have any information past September of 2021. That's the last time it was updated. So the first thing I asked it to write about was, I asked it to write an article about Teagan Brown in Syracuse. Now, it says it's a name that's synonymous with the excellence in Syracuse, which I found flattering, but not entirely true. But the one thing that really stuck out to me was it said I had a degree in social work from Syracuse University, which is just untrue. I'm getting my degree in history and broadcasting. So I read through it, some of it was true, pulled from stuff online, from social media and other articles I had been mentioned in and written, but overall pretty inaccurate starting out with that wrong degree. And next, since we are a stock analysis show, I asked the AI to write an article about what stock I should buy. And it said it actually couldn't give me any financial advice because that was something ChatGPT just isn't allowed to do. So next, I asked it to write an article about Tesla stock. And it actually pulled a lot of information out from online. And honestly, I couldn't really find anything that inaccurate in here, but that's because there's just so much content out there about Tesla and Elon Musk. Now, it did call Elon Musk charismatic, which, not exactly a journalistic standpoint I would have taken to write an article, a little bit different. But hey, overall, it was really interesting to ask about these subjects. But unless there is a ton of coverage about that topic or person online, like I said, the AI doesn't really get it right. Not even close, as shown by that apparent degree I have. And it also said I already graduated. Not true. But who knows? Maybe one day a similar model will be able to put together a whole segment just like this one. Bradley, back to you.
Teagan, thank you. I've seen some videos online where basically the whole video, the script is written by AI, but I've also seen some inaccuracies, so we're just going to have to wait and keep playing with it. Now, meanwhile, back here at home, last week the Supreme Court heard arguments on whether the Biden administration could broadly cancel federal student loan debt. The president heavily campaigned on providing that relief and signed an executive order to forgive up to $20,000 per person. Now, 538 says this move would forgive or reduce at least $40 million in debt, but could overpower the executive branch. Here to break down the roadblocks the Biden administration's facing is Market Shares analyst Dominic Chiappone. Hey, Dom, so what are we seeing from the conservative majority Supreme Court when it comes to the Biden admin's plan here?
Well, Bradley, as we've seen so far in arguments, it's currently a clash mainly over the scope of the executive branch. Now, let's take a quick step back here. The Supreme Court overheard arguments last week for two cases which could determine the legality of Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. In August 2022, Biden announced a multi-part student loan forgiveness plan which provides $20,000 in debt cancellation to Pell Grant recipients and $10,000 to non-Pell Grant recipients. But the plan faced a legal nightmare on multiple fronts in the lower level courts. Now, the Supreme Court needs to determine a legal precedent on both sides of the aisle. First, does the U.S. Department of Education have the legal authority to institute a plan like this, given current laws in place? And second, do individual states have the right to file a lawsuit in the first place to challenge the relief plan? As you can see, there's a lot to sort out here, so let's start off with the Department of Education. President Biden argues the DOE legally could invoke its plan through the 2003 Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act. That is currently up on your screen right now. The HEROES Act states that the Secretary of Education can waive or modify any requirement or regulation applicable to the Student Financial Assistance Program as deemed necessary. Now, a change can only occur if certain criteria met, such as, quote, if an individual resides or is employed in an area that is declared a disaster area by any federal, state, or local official in connection with the national emergency. Now remember, then President Donald Trump declared a national emergency during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020. In February 2022, Biden extended the national emergency declaration until February of this year. But the Supreme Court judges stuck to its constitutional grounds here, arguing that the Secretary of Education extended her authority too far in deciding to cancel student debt. Many judges argue Congress should be the main creator for such a policy. Here's how Chief Justice John Roberts explained that sentiment during oral arguments. Take a listen.
Representation of national interests in Congress would take into account, rather than what the Secretary in a particular case, who's weighing a lot of options and considerations as well, would take into account. I mean, if more than half the people say they don't need this relief, extending relief to that breadth certainly raises questions.
And now Dom joining us at the desk. Obviously, a lot of controversy and debate over this topic, those 6 states suing because of this plan. You know, in light of all of these arguments, how is it predicted that the Supreme Court is going to rule in this?
Yeah, the biggest challenge, obviously, is the scope of what can the executive branch, in this case, what can the Department of Education and the Education Secretary do to fulfill this? And ultimately, based off what we've seen with current rulings over the past couple weeks, as well as what we've seen, with the scope of this and the arguments that say that the federal government is overreaching its boundaries here, it's probably going to be that the Supreme Court would rule against us on constitutional grounds.
Dom, thank you. Now, coming up after the break, the labor market finally starting to cool off. We'll break down the numbers. See you on the other side.
Okay, so my typical day at the university is...
So you're doing your regular? Okay.
My own peers have told me this. Every single one of them have told me now they want to be like me now. I want people to laugh about it, but I also want them to see what is a typical day is like at the university. One day I was on the trolley going up to the South Campus one day, and then all of a sudden I was not expecting this, and then all of a sudden, yes, that's our TV star Thomas.
STEM is precise, no margin for error.
Dare to forget that. Dare to have fun with it. Get weird with it. Dare to send those old STEM theories flying past the neighbor's house into outer space. Dare to program something internet-breaking, record-breaking. Dare to blow their minds. Dare to learn the difference between sedimentary and metamorphic rock. Go find those rocks. Dare to keep daring. Dare to STEM. Check out She Can STEM to get started.
Thanks for tuning into Market Shares on this Sunday morning. The U.S. labor market has recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic, and the employment rate is currently around 3%. Market Shares numbers analyst Jacob Goldberg is here to break down why the market may not stay so hot in the near future. Jacob?
Well, before I talk about the future, Teagan, let's talk about the past first. We're going to see February 22 to December 22, basically the entire calendar year. And we saw tons and hundreds of thousands of jobs added every month. It started really hot as the COVID-19 pandemic began to dwindle. But then over time, at the end of the year, we've kind of seen it stay steady at around 250,000 jobs added each year. So pretty good for the economy. But why do we think the employment rate is going to, or unemployment rate is going to rise? Well, we're at the lowest unemployment right now since the 1980s, 3.3%. But you look back just a year ago, or 2 years ago, we're at 6.5%. So there's just not much room to add jobs when the unemployment rate is already so low. So that's kind of why people think that, the unemployment rate is going to rise over time. So why is the unemployment rate so low currently? Well, highest job gains, hospitality, food services up 25%, government listings up 54% as well. Pretty much every, industry affected by COVID-19 pandemic has risen, and hundreds of thousands of jobs have been added since, we've seen the COVID-19 pandemic dwindle. But we're contrasting this, and this is why people think that the job market is going to cool, is because sites like ZipRecruiter, like Indeed, like LinkUp have seen drastic declines in the amount of job postings on their websites. ZipRecruiter down 16%, Indeed down 40%, and LinkUp down 30%, so drastic. And with the Federal Reserve set to give their jobs report on Friday, we're going to see how this plays out. But Jerome Powell thinking that we can get down to that 2% inflation mark I talked about last week without cutting too many jobs. We'll see if that's possible, and he'll have to pitch that to the American people. Guys, that's all I have today.
Jacob Goldberg, thank you so much. And we've still got more coming up on Market Shares, because coming up, we will take a look at the sports streaming carousel. Stay with us.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner!
Go. Excellent. Soccer is fun. Yeah, I saw you guys out there. We're the family.
Welcome back to Market Shares. Sabres and Knicks fans, you may soon have a way to watch games without pirated streams or a cable subscription. MSG Networks is launching a new streaming service this summer. It joins a crowded field of regional sports networks going directly to consumers in an attempt to combat cord cutting. Chilekasi Adele joins us now. Chile, how much is this thing going to cost?
Well, Brad, this thing is going to be a bit pricey. Let's take a look at how much you'll pay if you want to subscribe. The new MSG Plus will cost you $29.99 a month. If you want to pay yearly, it'll run you about $310. There's also a single game option too. That'll be $9.99 a month. Or per game, excuse me. The service is available to people across New York as well as some parts of New Jersey and Connecticut. MSG holds the broadcast rights to the Buffalo Sabres and the New York Knicks. It also broadcasts the NHL's New York Rangers, New York Islanders, and New Jersey Devils. Now, it's an interesting time for regional sports networks like MSG. As Bradley just mentioned, they're not the only ones launching DTC or direct-to-consumer services. In New England, NESN, that's the home of the Boston Red Sox and the Boston Bruins, launched a streaming service last June. That cost $29.99 a month, like MSG Plus, and $329.99 a year, a bit more pricey. Bally Sports, America's largest pro sports rights holder, also launched a streaming service last September. It's $19.99 monthly and $189.99 annually. That is where MSG does appear to be different compared to different RSNs. It's trying to catch people who aren't religious fans, but may be interested in a game or two. MSG says those who receive its channels via a cable or satellite service will have free access to MSG Plus, replacing the MSG Go app that allowed cable subscribers to watch games on their phones and computers.
And Chile now joining us at the desk. Chile, it's not cheap. Only hockey and basketball. Do you think this is a hard sell? It sounds like a hard sell.
Very much so, right? I mean, here's the problem. New York is such a fragmented regional sports network market. I'm from Philadelphia. We have one network, NBC Sports Philadelphia. That's it. New York, MSG for your hockey and basketball, and then you also have Yes for the Yankees and the Nets, and you've got SNY too for the New York Mets as well. Here's the problem. Baseball gives you 162 extra days of programming. You lose that, and also the MSG also lost to Red Bull as well to Apple TV Plus when they had their whole deal with the league. So this is going to be a really hard sell. I see a lot of people doing the monthly or the Game Pass, but to buy it for a year, a lot of people are just going to say no.
Yeah, and let's take a look at the greater theme here. I mean, what is the deal with all of these regional sport networks going straight to the consumer rather than taking that, cable bundle angle?
Well, they can't get carriage. MSG has problems in New Jersey and Connecticut right now with Comcast. That's been going on for a couple of seasons, and you're not alone. Also, Altitude in Colorado as well has had this issue. Listen, do you know how much it costs you a month on DirecTV in New York State, at least in this region of New York, to have local sports?
I do not.
$13.99 a month. A lot of people, a lot of providers have decided that's not something we're willing to pay, and this is the next option here.
Yeah,
Thanks,
maybe they might be cutting costs. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is all the time that we have for this episode of Market Shares. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News. I'm Teagan Brown.
And I'm Bradley Hoppenstein. We'll see you next Sunday. Have a great week.